Hey everybody, welcome back to another video, and as you can see, we're going to talk Final Fantasy trading card game today, specifically my Wind Water Final Fantasy IV deck that, has a little bit of earth in there too. And this is something that I wanted to build as soon as Opus 11 came out because it's just got all my favorite characters in it. Obviously, 4 is a big part of my Final Fantasy experience. So I'm excited to share this deck with you, and we'll just get into it right now. Alright, so a brief overview of the deck. The deck is almost entirely wind and water, and it does feature a little bit of earth cards. We play those earth cards with the help of Class 8th Moogle, who's going to produce some earth CP for us, but we can also just discard earth cards for earth cards, which works out pretty well in my experience, because the earth cards that we're playing we're generally not playing by themselves anyway. They need to be live. So we're talking about Rydia, we're talking about Sessile. Those are cards that things need to be on board or conditions have to be fulfilled before we're going to play them. And then we also have some Exodus as a summon, but again, that is just in the deck for some synergies. So really we're looking at a wind water list, but we don't have to worry about any of that YRP stuff, but we do have some of the good staples in the deck. So let's take a look at how the deck actually functions and the different packages that we've put in here. So we're going to start off by talking about obviously all the 4 stuff that's in the deck. A lot of Final Fantasy IV cards. So there's a pretty big forward contingent. We've got 2 copies of Sessile, Ceodore, Rosa, Hooded Man, Edge, Barbariscia, and Rydia. So just like a ton of Final Fantasy IV forwards to kind of fit the theme of the deck. And we also have Porum and Leonora as a backup, and the Leonora will search out your Porum, which is very nice, so it's backup searching. And we actually only have one other water backup, and the rest are wind, and that's very specific because we don't want to play 3 water backups, because as soon as we do, then Edge is no longer live, and that makes him a dead card in your deck, and he is very nice to surprise people with, and he boosts so many forwards. So his second ability of boosting a forward by 4k if they're Final Fantasy IV is incredibly live in this deck, which is pretty awesome. So otherwise we have things like Barbariscia, which plays well with Pandemonium, and just as a main phase 2 play, whenever you attack, really you can just feint with a forward. They're going to take it or they're not. If they have a bigger forward and they block, you drop Barbariscia, then you're good to go. So she's pretty good. She's always been one of my favorite cards to play with, so it's good that she has natural synergy within this deck. But then the main combos that we're going to be playing include the Harvey family, so Sessile, Ceodore, Rosa, and as well as Rydia as another combo. So we'll get into those right now. So the Ceodore combo is simply you need to have Sessile and Rosa active, and you can dull them to play Ceodore onto the field. So we have a couple of Ceodore in the deck so that we can try to get him into the break zone as soon as possible so that this is live. And there's a lot of synergy with this combo because you don't want to not attack to play Ceodore and then not be able to block because you dulled two forwards. But there are ways to get around this. For example, with Rydia, you can give all your Final Fantasy IV forwards Brave, and then Sessile and Rosa can both attack on one turn, and then in main phase 2 they can dull and bring back a Ceodore. And Sessile, this Sessile here gives himself Brave as well. And you can also use the Earth Sessile in this combo, but he won't naturally give himself Brave, so you need to combo him with Rydia or Hooded Man to get full value out of him. So we also have Hooded Man that activates all your 4 forwards at the end of the turn. So if you are using the Sessile Rosa combo to bring out Ceodore, then you don't have to worry about them not being able to block. You might have to skip an attack, but they're going to be active again because you have Hooded Man to activate them. And this is something that you can do over and over. So there is really a lot of value here, and it feels pretty good when you pull it off. It's definitely something that I want to keep in this deck. So moving on, we've got our Rydia combo, we have our Sessile Minwu combo, I should mention that as well. So Sessile and Minwu work really well together because Sessile can take some incoming damage, and he can take 4k of it, and the original forward will take 4k, or however much is left. And if you have Minwu, they're both going to take 0 damage, which is really, really handy. So once you have Sessile Minwu out, it becomes very, very difficult for your opponent to actually be able to deal damage to you, unless they have some of the new fire cards that prevent damage reduction. They're not going to get through this combination. It makes Sessile, it gives you a free block every turn, which is really nice, and it kind of prevents just some ping damage stuff from going off as well, which is always good. And I know Minwu does some of that on his own, but this allows you to protect smaller forwards, which is always good. Okay, so now I believe we're going to talk about Rydia, because I think I remember what order I put these slides in. So Rydia is a card that we saw early a few opuses ago, but now she's back and she's actually printed in this set, and she's got some really cool synergy with this deck. So when she's on the field, all the 4 forwards are going to gain 1000 power and brave, which is, as we saw, a lot of forwards. There's 8 forwards in the deck, and we have run a lot of copies of them, so this is a really, really big boost for this deck. And if you have 4 or more category 4 characters, you may search for one summon of cost 1 and add it to your hand, which is why we have this cost 1 summon package. So with Rydia, I wanted to play as many 4 backups as possible in order to make her enter the field ability as live as possible, but I had to settle. I mean, it's already tough enough playing Porm as a backup and not a forward, so I had to settle with 2 backups, but then you only need one forward on the field, and then Rydia comes in, she can search. If you have 2 forwards on the field and your 2 backups, then she's pretty much guaranteed they have to remove 2 characters to fizzle the effect. So it's definitely something that gets live quite easily in this deck, and the targets are pretty good. Exodus has just been a really solid defensive ability. You can also bluff quite a bit with it and attack. Pandemonium, we're going to talk more about how that synergizes with the deck, but it's just a super strong card. And then Kukulane is just always good to blank forwards, great at blanking Reigns and other cards like that. So they all have a lot of use, and it's nice to fish them out. Whenever you play a 3 CP searcher like this on a forward that's on curve and has other abilities, that's just a really strong play because she effectively cost 1 CP, which is a really nice discount, and you're going to find yourself getting a lot of value out of this deck if you can assemble all the combo pieces. Okay, so moving on, next we're going to talk about our board clear combo, because it wouldn't be win water if you couldn't wipe your opponent's board. So we've got Fina, and she's obviously essential to this because of her 5k to everybody, but we also have Pandemonium and Penelo. So this is going to replace your typical Val4 combo that you would find in win water, because we don't want to run Val4, and it's going to be really easy to ramp up the board clear with this. You can play a Fina and deal 5k, and then you can cast Pandemonium to deal 2000 damage to your opponent's forward, 7k so far, and activate Penelo, and then you can tap Penelo and do another 1000. So that combo alone is right off the bat 8000 damage to your opponent's board exclusively, and that's off 5 backups. That's not unreasonable to do at all. Now if you need to push it a little bit, you can discard an extra card and get one more Penelo activation if you dull her, but then you need to be able to cast Pandemonium another way, so that's a little expensive. And then of course if you're pushing your opponent and they're at 5 damage, then you're just live with huge board clears because Pandemonium Pandemonium is doing 4k. But this is a pretty reliable combo because you just want to, you'll assemble Pinello at some point, you'll put her down, you're going to get to 3 damage, and then you just need Fina and Pandemonium, and we have a way to search Pandemonium. So this is a pretty reliable board clear and just a solid staple in the deck. Okay, so the next cards that we're going to talk about are the staples. These cards are pretty self-explanatory, and they're just in the deck because they're good. They don't have specific synergy with the 4, but we have to play them. So Y'shtola obviously is going to put a real pin in your opponent's plans and prevent them from being able to cast big summons on important turns. Diabolos is just an incredibly strong forward and actually does have some synergies with Pinello and has some synergies with Pandemonium, which work quite nicely. Zidane is the ultimate disruptor, getting into your opponent's hand, especially early in the game, discarding their key backup that they need to play the next turn in order to stay efficient. And then Veritas. Veritas was a personal tech choice for me, and the reason I put him in is I was having trouble sometimes with early aggression, and I just wanted a solid play to put out there to remove a forward and then just gain value from that point on. So he is currently in the deck, but that is certainly a slot that is adjustable if you want to put in other dark cards, light cards, whatever you want. Okay, so we have a few other cards that we have to talk about to kind of finish up the list, and those are the odds and ends. So Class 8th Moogle we already talked about is our Earth CP generator, and that is absolutely essential. Ninja or Archer are always good cards to include in your win decks because backup removal can be really useful. Breaking Minwu is particularly important, or just whatever your opponent's Yuna. There's so many important backups that you can break, so it's always good to have at least one in these types of decks, and you don't always have to use it, but it's good to have it. White Mage is another card that is particularly relevant right now because there's just a lot of break zone play, and putting this down and taking something important out of your opponent's break zone, and then having that option to cast or to use its ability whenever for just 1 CP, that's super useful. So this is a card that has to be played right now and probably will need to be played for the foreseeable future. And then finally, I have Echo, which is one of my favorite wind cards. She's just such a solid addition to any wind deck because as soon as you play her, you can look at the top card of your deck, and then you can draw it or put in the break zone, or sorry, put it in the bottom of your deck and then draw the next one. And that's just essential for finding the cards that you need in your deck. It's essential for early game finding more backups to play so that you can open nicely. And it's also an EX burst. It's got the backup activating potential for Pinello. It's got all sorts of great stuff going on. So I usually play Echo in my win decks, and if you haven't played Echo, then you got to check it out because it's just I would consider it almost a staple, at least for me. Okay, so that's pretty much the deck, and you really, when you're playing this deck, you really just want to assemble your backups and get to 3 backups as soon as you can. Get to 3 wind backups as well by the end of the game, so that your edge is live, and you don't have to worry about 4 forwards going into the break zone because we do have Hooded Man, and Hooded Man is going to be able to really mess with your opponent. Every time you play Hooded Man, you can bring back Sessiles, you can bring back Rydias, and then you can search more summons. You can bring back an Edge, you can bring back a Barbarecia, and it's really key to the deck. You can be really aggressive with attacking because of your Brave and your reactivation, and you can also be really aggressive with Sessile, Opus 5 Sessile's Dark special, because you can always bring more Sessiles back into your hand and cast on the fly to just really put a lot of pressure on your opponent, and you don't have to worry about the self damage as much because you do often have a lot of blockers in this deck. So it's really solid to be using that dark special as much as you can. So it really is I would say it's a mid-range deck. It can really overpower your opponent if you get out early with Sessile and then play Rosa, and then all of a sudden you can get your Ceodore out. Things can snowball quite quickly for you, but at the same time, this deck can start slower and you need to come back, which is one of the reasons why we have the Veritas in there. But we just have like a ton of value generating mechanisms in the deck, whether that is Rydia, whether that's Rosa. Rosa is often also a 1 CP3 cost, and she can cycle your deck really quickly with her action ability, which allows you to just go right through your deck to find all the really important cards so that you can pull off your board clears and your combos and all that fun stuff. So this is a deck that I think that you need to play a little bit with first to kind of get the hang of the mechanics, but then at that point it's pretty straightforward. So I know that a lot of other people have been building 4 decks in the set, so I want to hear from you, and I want to know what you thought about this deck and what are the changes that you'd make, because even when I posted about making deck techs, I had a bunch of people say that they had 4 decks of their own. So I know there's a lot of different ways to get out here. You don't even have to have the Earth at all. You could just be fully in Wind Water 4, and you could even do Mono Wind 4. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's Arc Fiends as well. There's Palamporum. So hit me up with your deck suggestions, with your comments, and we'll talk in the chat. Thank you so much for watching this video. You can show your support with a like and subscribe, and by checking out my Patreon at patreon.com/Mysidia Gaming. Please be sure to also check out Cards at Ulease for all your FFTCG singles and product needs. And I'd also like to thank FF Decks for creating a fantastic website that we use every day. Until next time, keep it real, Mysidians.